I started writing music when I was in a band called Concourse, and we were doing all kinds of music from straight ahead through free jazz, through the ECM stuff, and people were bringing their things in, and the head, the man whose band it was a wonderful sax player named Chuck Ventrillo, and he really wrote very well, and he inspired me to try writing, which I'd never done before. So some of the first things I did was write for bop heads, write some words, but then I got brave and learned to bring in my own things. When I started writing, my influences were Horace Silver, big influence. Something melodic about him is just very attractive, and we were doing many of his tunes. So I just started getting a lot of his recordings, and that's it. That did it. And all the ECM stuff, hard bop, and Chuck, all of the stuff that he brought in was a big influence on me too. And he was very influenced by Sonny Rollins. And of course, I of course fell in love with Sonny Rollins, because who wouldn't? He's so playful, and his rhythm, his rhythm is infectious, but he's just, in all his music, he's just playful, whether he's improvising or writing. There's a playfulness that comes across, and that was very attractive to me, and I've seen him any number of times, and he's a big hero of mine. A lot of times I write kind of serious songs, and this one was just very playful. I've written several versions of it, actually, and the first version that I wrote was for a small big band, which I recorded on my very first album, which was back in the 80s. And so Glad Bag has really changed a number of times. There was a time that I re-recorded it with Frank on guitar, and it was just a duo. And I just approached the chords differently for what kind of instrumentation I was writing for. And I like to play with standard harmonic progressions and change them a bit. I also like to write melodies that are a little on the top of the chord rather than so inside the chord. So it gets a little abstract. It makes them harder to sing too. Well, I mean, the harmony to Glad Bag is kind of not your usual harmony in a lot of ways. So to follow it with a guide tone, and you learn to sing harmonies that are not quite so standard, and don't go to a place where you expect them to, maybe. So the best thing to do always when you're starting is the bass lines and the guide tones. Then is, scale. You can work scales. How do they connect through the chords? Well, I'm working with Frank Brecher, who I've worked with for several decades, who is just a really fine guitarist. I think one of the finest. When he plays, his heart is totally in it, and his technique and his knowledge are bringing his heart forward. But I always know he's going to mean something when he strikes a note, and I love that about him. And then there's Ratso Harris, who is just an acclaimed bass player who has played with so many people over the years. And he's well known in New York, and for his work. He's just incredible on his technique, and he is a composer himself, as well as a jazz writer, and a wonderful person. And when he's behind me, I know I have a bed. And then there's Eric Johnson, who is, as many Philadelphians know him, a multi-talented drummer, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and a rock-solid bottom. A lot of time, it depends. I don't always start the same way when I'm writing a tune. When I'm writing a tune, if I have a reason for writing it, that's one thing. You know, if I have a stated purpose, it has to be this way. When I did my brass CD that I have out, it's all brass quintet and no bass, it's sousaphone on the bottom. And so I was aiming for a sort of kind of combination of Mingus and New Orleans on that recording. And I had that in mind, and I listened to a lot of that. If there was a time when I was writing a tango and I didn't want to write a traditional tango, but I poured that into my ears for a while, and sometimes it just happens. Other times I start with an improv. I just start improvising and including the lyric. You know, I might just say nonsense lyrics for a while. And so it really depends. It's not always the same. Philadelphia has a rich tradition of music, period, jazz in particular, but music in general, and everything in the city is very supportive towards the music in the city. You know, from the mayors down, since I've been here, it's a very nurturing city for the creative mind.